question for you. Thank you for your patience, by the way.
Yeah.
One of the great political footballs of our times, and the way which involves the left, let's say the populist left as well as the populist right, is the question of Islam in the West. You've described yourself as a nominal Christian, and then you describe yourself as speaking to somebody who is openly identifies as a Muslim. Where do you stand in this great question of Islam in the West, the role of Muslims in the West, integration, extremism, and some of the challenges around the values such as free speech? I'm thinking, for example, blasphemy and the Charlie Hebdo massacre in France, and all of the issues that arise from that, including, for example, some of the populist left's perhaps defense of some of these issues in the favor of Islamist Muslims, and some of the populist right's animosity towards the presence of Muslims in the West. Have you thought much about this question?
Yeah, but not enough. Because it's a question that to answer properly, I have to know a lot more about Islam than I know. But here would be my questions. Okay, first of all, I'm not willing to assume axiomatically that all belief systems are commensurate with Western democracy. And the reason I'm not willing to assume that is because there are hardly any Western democracies. So the belief systems of most of the world aren't commensurate with Western democracy. So the rule of thumb shouldn't be, well, people from all cultures are just as likely to support Western democratic ideals. It's like, no, obviously not, because those ideals only are present in a tiny minority of countries. We don't know how they got to be present there. Now, I would suggest that some of that has to do with the Judeo-Christian emphasis on the sovereignty of the individual, but also more technically maybe in Christian societies on the division between the church and the state. Now, and that's a division that isn't formally expressed in Islam. And so I don't know, I have a hard time conceptualizing Islam because I can't figure out if it's fundamentally religious or if it's fundamentally political. Or maybe it's an amalgam of both in a manner that it's not easy for a Westerner to identify. So I have some sympathy towards people who are curious about whether Islam has a tilt towards totalizing, like other doctrines have a tilt towards totalizing. And I would say the evidence for that is that it isn't obvious that Islamic countries have been able to give rise to sustainable Western-style democracies with fundamental emphasis on individual rights and responsibilities. So it's an open question. But, the people tend to think, well, the ethic, the individual rights / responsibility ethic of the West is somehow self-evident and it's agreed upon by people broadly throughout the world. It's like, I don't see it that way. I don't think that's the case. Now, the way forward, as far as I'm concerned, is to begin the process of the various serious discussions that are necessary between Christians, Jews, and Muslims, essentially, because I do believe this is fundamentally a religious issue, about how those systems of belief are commensurate, whether they can coexist in the same space, how that might be negotiated, what that would mean theologically and metaphorically. And, that dialogue, I don't think that dialogue has even really begun.
Well, Jordan, let me say to you that as a Muslim speaking to you now, I invite you to have that dialogue. I'm perfectly happy to have that dialogue with you. There's some of what you said that I think we could explore a lot further in another venue given the appropriate time.
Well, I hope we can do that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Jordan Peterson. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Nice talking with you.
Pleasure.